right. Well, hello. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Christine Goebel, and welcome to When Change Meets Resistance, moving from uncertainty to commitment. And I'm so glad you're here. We've got about 30 minutes of teaching today on change, and then 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. And so don't forget that for registering today, you gain access to a complimentary session with me. So Haley, you'll go ahead and put that in the chat for you. And definitely make sure you stick around at the end and keep those questions. So if you have a question for me, just put it in the chat and we'll make sure I answer it before we go. So, as I was thinking about this, I was trying to come up with some analogy, and I started thinking about those moments when we drive up steep hills. So, you're going up this hill, and the only thing you can see is the sky. And so, you know that the road's going to continue, but from your seat, you can't see what's waiting on the other side. So, it could be something like a gentle curve, it could be a sharp turn, there could be a stoplight, could be a traffic jam. And so naturally, what you do is you start to slow down because uncertainty changes how you drive. And when organizations experience change, it's the same thing. So leaders might know where they're trying to go, but the people responsible for getting them there can't always see what's ahead. And so that's where resistance often begins, not because people don't want to move forward, but because they don't really know what they're moving toward. So at a company suite, we don't remove the hills. We absolutely help you see where they are. So I'm going to just, there we go. A little glitchy. So we do that through workshops, through programs, professional development, and all the things we do are designed to help people communicate more clearly, lead effectively. We help them navigate change, create greater confidence, and get those large groups of people moving together to a common destination. And we believe, as you know, a business doesn't change itself, it's the people who do. And when people cannot see what is ahead, they will hesitate, they will question, and they might resist. And it's not because they're unwilling to change, but it's because they're trying to understand what the change means for them. So we've got tons of tools, freebies, all over our website, social platforms, YouTube videos, you name it, it's out there. So we just encourage you to take advantage of it. All right, so today we're going to focus on recognizing the reasons why people resist change, building trust and confidence during times of uncertainty, and leading change in a way that inspires commitment instead of compliance. So let's go ahead and start a poll. So I want you to take a look at it. What type of change in your is your organization experiencing right now? So you can go ahead, click right on the screen and enter your selection. Whoa. All right. Very good. Very good. Okay. So we see a lot of changes, very good leadership, staffing changes, organizational restructuring, and new technology. Okay, so those are the top three. So let's go ahead and end that. All right, so what is interesting about this, we only have one with rapid growth or expansion, but it looks like most of you are experiencing some sort of staffing changes. So this is very important right now because what ends up happening when we have staffing changes or restructure, that's all change. And so anytime new people are coming in or old people are leaving, we've got change. All right. So let's move on. Okay, so whether you have a new operating system, you've got new AI, because we know most of us are using AI in some way, shape, or form. We've got that restructure, could be mergers. Anytime we've got this new thing, we've got a change initiative. And so for years, one of the most frequently cited articles on organizational change estimates that about 70% fail. And it could be something small, it could be something big. And by fail, I mean it didn't get to the intended outcome that it had. And there's debate over this number. So it's really just hey, I'm just raising some awareness that anytime there's change, there's a pretty big risk that it's not going to work the way you want it to work. And so as I prepared, I also noticed that that statistic that I've been talking about for years, it's kind of old now. So it's about 23, 26 years old. Okay, so what I came across was something else that was interesting. So this is more recently. This is Alnor and Atia, and they did a lot of research on mergers. So I want you to take a look at this as this is the most extreme change that can take place. And they're saying that roughly 80% of mergers fail to achieve that intended objective or stick, where a lot of times they'll end up dissolving the original crew. And that's a very normal thing. So the larger, more complex your change is, just keep in mind it's probably more difficult to bring people together and bring them along on the road. All right. So change management. Every change you have has two sides. We've got a how and a who. So the how, this is the change itself. So we might spend months planning for a new strategy, a budget, new staff, timelines, technology, communication plans, campaigns, you name it, right? So the first question we ask ourselves is, how are we going to make this happen? And then the other side of it is the who side. And so this is where people experience the change. So we might ask things like, why are we changing? How does this affect me? Am I capable of this change? What am I losing? Are we going to be successful? Do I trust the people who are leading us through the change? And so the question we ask with who is experiencing the change and what are they experiencing? Because a lot of times most organizations, they spend a lot of their time thinking about the how, and they get really technical in how something's going to work. But the really emotionally intelligent ones, they spend just as much time thinking about who. So the how implements the change, the who determines whether the change succeed. And keep in mind that most of these change initiatives are going to fall short because the human side of it, that side of how it affects each individual person, is usually underestimated. Okay, so I want you to bear with me a little bit because we're going to dig into resistance and what the clues for it look like and sound like. So, some typical statements, these are very normal things that you hear when there's change coming. When I look at them, I'm always looking for patterns. So, when we're dealing with people, we want to listen for patterns because we're human, so we're all extremely different, but what is the same about us are these patterns. So when I hear things like this, I automatically start thinking, well, what do they all have in common? And so sometimes if we look at it one way, we could look at it and say, well, there's resistance, there's negativity, there's complaint, and all of that's possible. I'm not saying that that might be true, but look at it a little deeper. So I want you to go to the next level. And so they're all communicating something that hasn't been addressed, and they're revealing that there is a need. And so if I look at a statement like, we've tried this before, it could mean that they're saying, I don't believe this will be any different. So we've done it once, we're going to do it again. It's going to have the same negative outcome or no outcome at all. This will never work. That's just meaning there's a lack of confidence in the plan. Again, the next one, I don't understand the purpose, right? Why do things keep changing? Well, then they don't understand why the change is necessary in the first place. If nobody asks me, therefore I don't feel heard or I don't feel valued or that my opinion even matters in the situation. And so the words that I want to hear is what I'm listening for that's underneath it. So this is what surfaces. Well, what is next? And if we're fortunate enough that somebody says something out loud, because, we say a lot of stuff in our head, but we don't always say it out loud. So I want you to start looking for the behavioral cues, because these people that don't speak up naturally, they will show it on the outside. So we got half of our people that might make a comment. We have these other half of the people that might act differently. So again, silence from somebody who normally contributes, slower decision making, passive agreement, which is something like sure, but then they don't follow through or do the next thing. This could be complaints after the meeting, not during it when something needs to be voiced. Could be more mistakes, missed deadlines, low energy, things like that. And so the way we have to look at things like this is understanding that these are not a conclusion. This is not a final end. What it is, it's just a clue. So that's where perception might take over and go the wrong way. Because a lot of times, especially in the work that we do, the presenting issue or the symptom that we tend to get a lot of times is that, well, they're being silent, or meaning this person's just disengaged, or so and so's very negative. They might hear skepticism and then just assume that somebody's resisting because they're stubborn, or they just don't like it when we do this. And then sometimes they see that hesitation and they start assuming that there's just an unwillingness, complete unwillingness to help or to move something forward. And so if we're thinking in terms of emotional intelligence, we think always a step further. We're looking for what's underneath it. So what might this behavior be communicating, or what might this person be experiencing if they're voicing this to me? And we have to think about things in terms of curiosity. So I need to get curious. I need to ask more questions so I can better understand. So a nice, easy way for you to think about it is observe before you interpret. So you need to pay attention to what's going on. Don't get emotional about it. Just observe it. Be curious. Then we want to notice the behavior. We want to not draw a conclusion, but we want to get to that underneath part. And so if you spent any time with us in the past, then you've seen this before, but this is my favorite place to start. We have the observation. We have what we listened for, what we looked for. That thing is happening right now, and we have two ways we can go with it. So we're observing and we're getting curious. Well, if we're getting judgmental and making assumptions, we're moving this trust needle in the wrong direction, which then leads us to feeling frustration, disappointment, and then we get to a place of resentment. This is very far away. It's small thinking, which is why I use the smaller circles here. And it's dangerous. Red lights, dangerous. But we want to move forward. So instead of making an assumption about somebody else's behavior without asking questions, we want to move forward. So to understand, we ask questions, we're listening, we're staying in that curious observation land. And then we earn respect and value, and then we have trust. So what's important for you to notice is that last little bit that I talked to you about noticing the behavior and getting curious before you draw conclusions. This is the land that you're doing it in here. You will never get to respect and value if you're not seeking to understand what's going on with somebody else. So take a snapshot of this. If you want a little postcard, just drop me a note and I'll send you one that's got more information on this particular slide. But this is how trust is earned in relationships. If this is not solid inside of an organization and people don't understand that this is how we build relationships, that 70% of change that fails, that's what you're going to see. So if you want to lessen that number, you work on the people first, then you start working on the change that you're trying to implement. So let's talk about commitment. And the reason this is important is because people they don't commit to change, they commit to purpose. So that's why things like your mission, your vision, your values, operating systems, all those things matter. So here's the framework that I want you to think about it in. So you have your mission. This is answering why are we doing this? So if we don't have purpose, change might feel very random. So if we're making a change, we want to tie it right back into, and this is why we exist. So therefore, this is why a change like this makes sense. We also have our vision. So this is where are we going? And what's interesting about vision is people are really tolerant of uncertainty if they can see the destination. So if I know I'm in Florida and I want to get to New York, if I know New York is the destination, I'll tolerate the traffic, the roadblocks, all of that stuff on the way because I know where I'm going. And I understand that there's going to sometimes be some things that get in the way. We have our values. This is how are we going to get there? So what the values do for you, that is how you treat each other. And that creates consistency inside of your organization. So these core values reassure people that even though things are changing, our principles will not change. Who we are is who we are to the core, and how we're going to treat each other remains the same. So it becomes consistent and predictable, and people love that. Next, I want to talk to you, just mention real quick here about confidence. And so this is why I love working off a system. So if I've got some of this people stuff taken care of, I can start to introduce my operating system, which will start to tell me on whether or not I can succeed or we can succeed as a team, because people they don't want chaos. Okay, they want clarity. And when we have a good functioning operating system, we have clear expectation, defined roles, we have accountability, there's consistency in the communication, we've got a process for solving problems, we have healthiness. And so it doesn't mean it's perfect and it doesn't mean that it's without conflict. It just means that we have the checks and balances there for us. And so it supports all the other commitments that we've made. And if you have an operating system and you're just trying to understand it a little bit better, August 18th, Unplugging It. We are doing another webinar just on why great systems don't always produce great results. And so I'm going to dig into a little bit more around operating systems then. And then finally, this trust piece here. So the leadership answers, will you lead me through it? And so this is where emotional intelligence comes in, because people, just like we want to watch and look and listen and do all of that, well, guess what? People are watching us. They're looking at us. They're listening to us. They want to see how consistent we are. Are we doing what we said we were going to do, or are we doing something different? And so, are you calm? Are you actually listening, meaning active listening, where you're asking more questions? You're going a little bit deeper than the first answer they give you. Are you transparent? Are you approachable? You know, if somebody walks in your office and you give them a dirty look right off the bat, you're not approachable. So you've got to work on that, or you don't have clear boundaries. And so sometimes just creating better boundaries makes you more approachable because they understand how to approach you. So we've got to clear up some of that with you. So I want you to use the chat on this next one. I just want you to think about someone. Think about someone who inspired you to be a better version of yourself. And all I want you to do is put their first name in the chat. And this could be a boss, it could be a coach, it could be a parent, a teacher, a friend. And I don't need to know why. I just want to see what you're putting, the names you're putting in the chat. Aw, thanks, guys. That's good. Good. So if you've ever been part of a webinar before, a lot of times if you ask people to put something in the chat, there's a little bit of a hesitation. And so I want you to take a minute and I want you to look at those names because every single one of those names represents somebody who had an impact on somebody else's life. And so you do not need to put this in the chat, but I do want you to think about something. What is it about them that stands out? There's a characteristic about them that stands out to you. It could be trust. It could be consistency, calmness. It could be any of those things. And what's real about this is when they really impact our lives, we don't think about things like strategic planning or their skills in project management or accounting or the process they use for something. I mean, you might get a nugget from somebody, but the real people that change your life, you think about things like how they treat you, you think about how they believe in you, or they challenge you, or how they made you feel. And people in general aren't inspired to change by process. They're inspired to change by people. And so great leaders are going to use strategy to move an organization, but the ones that are deeply emotionally intelligent, they're going to build trust and they're going to express purpose and they're going to understand that relationships are the only way to move people forward and through the change. So I want you to think about this because people, again, we're not resisting change. We resist what we don't understand, things we don't trust, and things we don't feel prepared to do. So whether you're leading change or you're experiencing change, we need to pause before we act. So last month we talked about reaction and response, and we have to make sure we're doing that pause in the middle for that mindfulness. So before you announce a change or react to a change, because sometimes change is not within our control. So there's a few things we want to think about. So the first thing is, can people connect this to our mission? And you should be asking yourself, can I connect this to our mission? Does it make sense to me? Is it going to make sense to everyone else? Next, we want to look at, are all the leaders aligned on the message? Have we talked completely and thoroughly and shared all our challenges before it's announced to everyone else? Am I aligned on it? So if you say you're aligned on it, be aligned on it. If you say you're aligned on it and you're not, that's going to create confusion because again, you're being observed. People are listening, they're looking, they see what you're doing. So we want to make sure that you are actually aligned on what's happening. So what might people fear losing and what might I fear losing? So fear is one of those things, it's sneaky, but it's always there to some degree. And so I don't know that I've met anybody that's completely fearless. I've met people that are more fearless than others, but I don't know that I've ever met anybody that is completely without fear. So it's a very real emotion, but what are you afraid of? Especially loss in the workplace, something as extreme as, am I going to lose my job? So how will I listen and how will I communicate? And the biggest thing I want you to see here is that the success that we have of change, how we lower that number. We don't want the 80% fail. We don't want the 70% fail. We understand that most change initiatives are going to have some variation of what actually happens throughout as the change unfolds, but it's not really shaped by what's happening. It's the people's response to what has actually happened. That's where the fears lie. So I want to thank you so much for coming today. That is a fire hose session on change and how people adapt to change. And I just want to thank you for coming. Don't forget, we've got our upcoming webinar on why great systems don't always produce great results. If you are in the midst of implementing an operating system or have an operating system that's just not working well, or you're not using all the components of it, this next webinar will unpack a lot of the reason why that's happening and what you can do about it. And so be sure that you sign up for the 15 minutes. Again, Haley's got the link in the chat. And you can reach out to me directly or any members of our team if you have questions that you prefer to keep private.